my friend Mark.
Got it. Thank you, Andy. We are doing this session on body language today, which is why we did the hokey intro with the movement of the hands there. But actually, we're ready to dive right in here and want to get into the first sort of topic on body language, which, from my perspective, can be summarized as the podium is not your friend. And by that I mean, when I do a keynote talk, or when I'm teaching a course, and there's a podium there, I never use it to stand. I am personally not comfortable with that. And you may think, particularly if you're a little nervous, that it would be a good idea to sort of hide out behind the podium. It can feel like a security blanket. But we're going to talk more. We're going to talk about a whole host of things in these next 30 minutes related to body language that we think are actionable and that you can apply right away to your own speaking style. I will tell you, though, that from my perspective, my opinion is that when you do that, you are removing some visual interest. It doesn't mean that you can't maybe stop there intentionally, maybe even to check your notes briefly, right? And we talked about, memorization of those things last time. But one of the reasons I move around, particularly because I'm comfortable doing that, is because I do want to create some more visual interest, and it prompts your listeners to track you a little bit more with their eyes, like an infant, right? Seriously, that's a developmental milestone, as some in the audience may know already, does the baby track with their eyes, right? And one other last thing I'm going to say on this before I bring Andy in, because he just recently did a really interesting talk on body language to a group he will tell you more about, is if you are nervous, and particularly in the beginning of a speech, totally normal. If you are nervous, moving around, totally normal. And in fact, I think we've discussed this too, not counterproductive, and actually maybe a benefit, as long as it's within a range and it's not debilitating and you're not just totally distracted by it. But that's a topic for our previous one we did, and we'll touch upon it again at some point, I'm sure. But my point is, if you are also moving around, that can be a good way to expend some of that nervous energy because you're moving. And we'll go into much more detail, but I wanted to start this by saying the podium is not your friend. And then I'm going to have, I'd love Andy to come in here and tell you about a talk he did recently where he discussed another really interesting piece of body language. Andy, take it away.
Thank you. I got it backwards because I'm not on Mirror. Because if I'm on Mirror, you can't.
Thank you, UK, for coming in.
Read behind. Thank you to the UK for being here. We appreciate you. And if you have body language questions, pop them in the chat. If you got a chance to look at that article I posted, you may have some questions from there. We can talk about it or not. We're here for you. The one the conference I just did. So I was speaking to women engineers, and we were talking about imposter syndrome, and we were talking about public speaking anxiety, and I kicked it off with two questions, and the one that's relevant for us here is something I call leaks of nervousness. What are your nervous leaks? And I just got the whiteboard out like this. So if you're in the chat, give us a nervous leak. For me, it's my hands. They shake. I get shaky hands.
And so a nervous leak is something that betrays the fact that you're nervous, that the group can see.
So so when we have uncontrolled nerves, how does it get out of our body? Because it's going to get out. It's going to escape. So nervous leaks are those pressure release valves. For me, it's shaky hands. My hands start to shake. For other people, well, Mark, what's your tell?
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking, I think that it is sometimes, filler words. So, it'll be like some more likes and ums and things like that. And when I start to
I'm going to
relax
stop you
and
because
breathe,
I'm gonna call you on that. That's not body language.
it's not body language.
What's
That's
a
true.
body language leak?
What's a body language?
We have one from our UK friend, and he rocks.
Yeah, rocking. That's a good
Right?
one.
He just
Yeah, I think for yeah,
ever so subtle back and
yeah.
forth, and I'm going to
Like
do
you're
it for a
soothing
moment,
yourself.
and you'll
Yeah,
notice it's distracting, right?
yeah.
It's
That
distracting.
yeah. So I'll just say my tail would be like unintentional movements, kind of like that. It's not really rocking, but it's like just pacing. I think that's the way it is. Yeah. I'm thinking back now. It's definitely pacing.
Pacing. That's a good
Yeah.
one. People always ask me, should I move on stage? I say, yes, move, but don't pace.
Move with intention, right? Like move
Move
with
with intention.
intention. Yeah.
Um, so all three of these, um, rocking, shaking hand, pacing, um, they all have, I think, they have a source, and therefore they have a cure, or at least
Hmm.
a cure for most people. And what I talk with people about is their knees and their feet. It all starts in our feet, right? It starts with how we're standing. And I talk with people. There are a lot of people who stand with knees locked. And when you stand with your knees locked, you're in a very unstable posture.
Hmm.
And then you can fidget. Or you never land, you just walk because you're nervous. But if you bend both knees a little bit and move the weight forward on your feet, so think about the caricature of like a baseball infielder ready for a play.
Hmm.
Don't be that low because you'll look ridiculous on stage, but come up from that. So you're standing tall, but the weight is a little bit on the balls of your feet and both your legs are locked and you have weight in both feet and you're grounded. And it's really hard to rock. It's really hard to pace. It's really hard for your hands to shake if your feet are grounded because your whole body now is grounded. So that's one of the things I talk about with people is when you come out on stage, come out and land and ground yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Eh,
that's
yeah. I think that is really, really a specific and an important technique. And I would say that you mentioned this earlier, Andy. I just want to kind of underscore it is whether you're fidgeting or you're pacing or you're rocking. So, like all physical manifestations of an emotion you're feeling, which is nervousness,
yeah,
probably, right? So, when you move with intention, I kind of see it as a bit of a release valve because it does take energy to move, obviously. And so you can maybe burn off some of that nervous energy by moving. And then with the intention idea, so right when I'm saying like when I get nervous, I pace. So I'm not, there's no intention there.
there's
It's
no
like almost like
intention, right? It's
it's like the
just
fight or
back
flight,
and
right?
forth,
I'm like
right?
flighting, I'm flying away. Um, However, if you just tweak that movement a little bit, so if you're rocking or you've got your hands moving or you're pacing, if you tweak it a little bit by stopping and then making a point and then moving in a way that kind of reflects what you're talking about. So if you're going to a next topic or a next
Yeah,
paragraph, a movement there is very much in line and intentional.
yeah. It's interesting you bring up this movement. I was just at TEDx McGill, and one of the things I don't like about the TED stage is the dot. You're not allowed to move, and the dot's not very big. Like I went up on the stage, like I was checking it out, and I was coaching someone who was on the stage, and then was close enough to see it's tiny, or at least this version of TEDx. The dot's not very big. And there was a really interesting thing that happened in the third talk when I was there. Person was had these repetitive gestures. which tend to be nervous leaks. It was like
Mm-hmm.
had one hand up and then another hand up and then one hand up and then another hand up and then one hand up and then another hand up. And this went on for about a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of looked around and then he walked off the dot. Here he goes, right off the red dot. And there was almost a hush in the audience. It was like, well, what's going to happen? Like, he went off the dot. Is someone going to come out with a cane and like pull him back? Nothing bad happened. And in fact, something wonderful happened. All his nervousness disappeared. All his nervousness went away because now he could move. And the restriction of being on the dot was messing him up. And I'm so glad he moved off the dot. I'm so glad nothing bad happened when he did. Because he was great. His physical presence dramatically improved when he was allowed to move.
Yeah, I like that point so much. And there's a comment too in the chat that I want to address because it points to something that's really important about movement. Another way of saying, like, move with intention is natural, if it's natural and authentic. And the question that we have is, I move around, I move my hands around too much on Zoom, and how can I stop that? But it happens so naturally. So I guess my question is, have you found that people that you're interacting with on Zoom find that hand movement to be distracting or negative in any way? Because if it's happening naturally, that's really the key, that it's authentic and natural, or that it reflects what you're talking about. So, moving from one area to another while you're transitioning from one point to the next, but while you're actually delivering the point, you're standing in one place. And actually, I'm
gonna flip to a widescreen view here.
Mm-hmm.
This is a widescreen view that we see on Zoom. When I present on Zoom, my hands are moving quite a bit down here, and then I'll do things here. I'll use my hands as props. So I will have moments where I intentionally bring my hands into the picture and use
Mm-hmm.
them, and then let them drop. And I still am like, I'm a hands guy. So they'll be moving down here and you see my shoulders move a little bit. You may see a little bit, but then they'll come up and I'll talk about, like, I have this little bit I talk about meeting the audience where they are. So we meet the audience where they are, and then we walk them to our research where we are.
Right. Yeah,
and
really
this
good.
pattern here mirrors a PowerPoint slide where I have a picture of a coffee shop and a picture of a research lab. So I think I think explaining things on, you can use your hands on Zoom, but either bring them up and use them, or bring them down and let them move, but outside the screen, so they're not distracting.
And as you're saying, Andy, like that difference, because we get used to what we keep seeing over and over. So if it's hand movements the entire time, they lose their effectiveness. But if they're below the screen and then they're brought up intentionally, then that keeps our attention. It's a little more interesting. I think that's a great way of approaching it, because I fear if we said, oh, by the way, like, don't move your hands so much, well, then you're back to TEDx McGill and the guy on the dot. You're going to start thinking about, well, I can't move my hands as much. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to make my points. And by trying to keep those two thoughts in simultaneously, you're not going to be as effective. So let those hands move, like you're saying, Andy. Let them move naturally below the screen. And then at times, if it's appropriate and reflects what you're saying, bring them up. And then you have to think about, like, oh, I got to stop moving my hands so
much. Yes. I want to bring up a comment here from Lynx, who's a friend from Pitch Club. Makes one relatable. I think one of the things we forget is that a little bit of nervousness is okay. A little bit of nervousness doesn't alienate us from the audience, especially if we're able to move through it. and do it anyway. And it does. I mean, it depends on I say this with the caveat that it depends on the situation, right? If you're in a situation where you're presenting outside your comfort zone and people know that, then a little bit of nervousness is okay. If you're in a situation where you should be in your comfort zone, for instance, a founder pitching their company, then nervousness, not so good. No nerves there. We need to really get beyond nerves in that space.
Mm-hmm.
But a researcher, like a young researcher presenting at a big conference for the first time, a little bit of nerves, it's gonna make you relatable. It's gonna make you relatable.
Yeah, I think that I can imagine as you're talking, Andy, about the founder, it's like, so this is the first time I'm doing this, so I'm a little nervous.
Yeah,
And
that's
they'll
a
be like,
bad plan.
nervous, little nervous laughter. But yes, definitely. And then, carrying that through the entire presentation would get annoying, regardless of what it was. I think maybe you can get, if you're in a situation like you're saying where you're not used to being it's clear that this is a little bit out of your comfort zone, maybe referencing it at the beginning, or sometimes what you're doing is you're sort of playing a character, right? Like you're describing someone else. I do that sometimes when I talk about this particular story, and as I'm talking about the story, I'm sort of acting out some of the things that happened, and I'm sort of
Yeah.
playing the character, right? And so there's movement there that can be nervousness there, but then it stops once I sort of get out of character. So the
One of
famous character.
one of my favorite competitions that I coach every year is the 3-minute thesis. And one of the unique things about the 3-minute thesis competition is you're not allowed you're only allowed one slide. So the slides can't help you. So when you want to explain something, you got to use your hands. That's all you have is your hands. And there's this great I'll post it in the chat. I have a clip of it. It's Shane, and he won 2 years ago, and he's talking about a drug treatment for cancer that they embed the drug in a DNA cage, and then they release the drug they open the DNA cage with light, so people don't have off-site reactions like losing your hair, because they can just say you have cancer in your leg. They can shine light on the leg, and that's the only place the cancer treatment will be released.
Wow.
And he describes it. He says, so we take the drug and we put it in the DNA cage, and it moves through your body. And then we shine light on it, and it opens up. And it's brilliant. And I think too often we think that our slides have to do that work for us. Our slides are there, and it's like, no, do the work. If there's something you can do with your hands, if there's a moment that you can show, like I was doing a moment ago with the coffee shop, and then walk them across to get them into your lab, right? If you can do that work with your hands, it's so much more engaging, because now people are looking at you instead of your slides.
Right. Yeah, such a great point. And again, the all the processing from your audience, being the processing in their minds, you want to make that as easy as possible for people to process the information, because if it's too difficult, people tune out, right? Like when you say words they don't understand, or there's slides that are packed with so much information that it just takes a lot of cognitive. It's a heavier cognitive load,
right?
To do that. So but I guess it's been shown that when humans are processing like faces and images, it's much easier for the brain to process things.
Instant.
Yeah, and so you're making it easy. You're talking. What you're saying is being reinforced by something visual. We process that very much more easily, and it's just a great way of reinforcing. I had in the course that I teach last Thursday, a scientist was talking about an enzyme and how it like gobbles up.
Right? I love that, right? I almost did it as you said that. I was like little Pac-Man.
Right. So Andy and I have not rehearsed this beforehand, but the scientist, as we were practicing, he used a Pac-Man illusion, like pop culture
Yep.
illusion, right? And so he said Pac-Man, and I said, "Wow, that's brilliant, that's great." And you might want to think about reinforcing by using your hand. And so, anyway, yes,
Was he
exactly.
willing to do
So
it,
great.
or did he say, "Oh no, I can't possibly do that. I'm a scientist"?
No, I think he's going to do it. We'll see because he has
Good.
to self-record, and
Good.
we'll see if he actually does that. But yeah,
Yes, you may be a researcher, but guess what? You're allowed to be a human being too. And when
and you
you're on
have to be,
stage, we'll
yeah,
like you more if you're a human being as well. We'll
yeah,
like you more.
and
And you'll be more effective. You'll be more memorable. You'll be more engaging, right?
yeah,
Two things I want to make sure we cover. We got 9 minutes.
yeah.
One is facial expressions because they're so important. And then the other is where. So we talked about standing on stage, but I want to talk a little bit about where on the stage because I think there's a secret to unlock there that is worth talking about. Um, so do you want to talk about facial expressions, and then I'll talk about the stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, let's do it. So I guess what I go back to overall when you're thinking about body language is really two things, and they're related. One is, are they natural and authentic, which essentially means, do they reflect and reinforce what you're saying? Because if they do, then that's golden. That's where you want to be. It's just when we start to pace, when we start to rock, when our hands start to shake, there's really nothing that we're saying that it relates to that. It's just our own thing, right? As a way to cope with being nervous. So when you have your facial expressions, do they reflect what you're saying? Like, well, we came upon this discovery and we were surprised. And then we really got down to work and we looked at this and we were thinking, what? So everything I'm doing is reflecting what I'm saying. So you've got the Pac-Man idea going.
Will you
So I
do
think facial,
so?
yeah,
Can I just interject for 1 second?
yeah, go.
I I want to ask Mark to do that again, and I want everybody to look at his eyes because we forget we think facial expressions and we look at mouths, but look at his eyes and watch what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah. So we're doing our research, and then all of a sudden we realized we had missed something that was the key to what we were working on. So we got down to work and we really focused for the next 2 weeks on running these experiments. We kept thinking like, maybe we need to go in this direction.
See all that stuff going on in his eyes? That's that's freaking magic. That's that's the difference. Oftentimes, that's the good to great because people have content and then they go and they deliver it and they deliver it. They stand behind a podium and they get in this monotone, mono emotion space, or they do what Mark just did, which is relive the moment in front of us. And when you relive that moment in front of us, you take us to that moment. You're trying to describe a moment, but if you want us to go there with you, you need to relive it and allow us to watch you relive it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all in you. You don't need lessons in how to do this. You just need permission.
Perfect.
So
Yeah.
consider this permission to be human, consider this permission to share how you feel, and watch your presentations take off because it's it's the difference. It's the good to great. Um, when we see it in your eyes, like we don't see a half smile, we see joy, right? We see genuine joy or genuine passion. We see that right up through your eyes. We see it in your eyebrows. We see it like it's a whole thing. But you got to give into it. You got to allow yourself to do it.
And I'll just say real quick on this, you give energy which is what this is, right? And you get engagement. So you get that reciprocal reaction from your audience. And the one thing though is if I did 30 minutes and I was doing that like every other word or phrase or whatever, it would get annoying. You'd be like, this is awful. Like, this is terrible, right? We
Don't be
need to
Jim
have
Carrey.
that. Yeah, we need to.
Links just said like Jim Carrey, like
Yeah,
king
yeah,
of facial expressions.
yeah,
Yes, but
yeah.
don't go that far.
Yeah,
Don't
it's
go
like
that far.
too much. You can go because we want to be surprised. We
Right.
want this content sort of diversity. You can't do it for throughout the entire talk every sentence or so. But Andy, please get to your movement on stage. I think we didn't
Oh, the
really cover that.
stage thing. So I do this thing. I cut the stage into 3 parts: the back third, the middle third, the front third. And actually, when I'm doing this in person with people, I often have tape and I put X's across the back third. Like I'll just X out the stage and I say, you're not allowed to stand in the back third of the stage. I call the back third the death zone. Because when you're standing in the back third of the stage, the message you're giving to your audience is, I'd rather be off stage. I'd rather not be here. So it's the death zone. It's that zone that says, I'm scared to death. I don't want to be here. So I'm going to stand as far away from you as I can possibly be. So your first move has to be a step forward. And then you play with the middle third and the front third. And the way you play with the middle third and the front third is a little complicated. And there isn't a, okay, this is where you stand on the middle and the front. It depends on power and size, and it depends on the physical height of the stage and the distance to the audience of the stage.
Yeah.
Because if you're 6'4" and you're built like an NFL linebacker and the stage is 4 feet in the air and you come stand on the front of the stage and start leaning down on us, the whole audience is going to do this and they're going to be scared of you because you're going to be overwhelming them. But if the stage is the same height and you're 5'8" and 170 pounds dripping wet, like not a big guy, then you can come to the front of the stage. But if your audience is, so this brings us full circle. I just did this talk with undergraduate women engineers,
Mhm.
and I'm a 50-year-old with alphabet soup after my name. I don't want to come to the front of the stage. I don't want to be intimidating. In fact, what I did when I was talking with them is I sat down in a chair. Even though I know my voice is better and my energy is better when I stand, I'm one of them when I sit. So where you choose and how you choose to stand on the front 2/3 of the stage is dependent on all of those things I was just talking about. And
Yeah.
what you want to do is you need to decide how you want people to feel and how much power you want to create or not create. And read the audience. Read the audience. Are they leaning in or are they leaning back? Are you coming forward excited but low and quiet? Or are you coming forward loud and commanding and pushing them away from you? And
Yeah.
that's really different. That's really different. You want them to lean in.
Andy, if I
So
could, yeah, I'm sorry.
go.
Go ahead.
I get so excited talking about this stuff, so
Well,
I'll shut
yeah.
up and your
No,
turn.
no, no. First thing, Lloyd. Great to see you in here. And I want to say just two quick things that kind of encapsulate what you're just saying, Andy. One is, how do you want them to feel? And so when you're thinking about body language, how do you want them to feel with your body language? And then how does your body language relate to your content? So like when you're sitting down like that in the beginning, genius, because you're connecting with them. You're one of them, just like you said, Andy. And then maybe you get up and you put the chair to the side at some point. And
I
then
didn't
there's
stay
other,
seated.
yeah, exactly. But you do that in the beginning because you're establishing this connection. So, you've heard me say connect before you communicate. Particularly, like I go in, tall white guy in a room which is all women, right? Say, for example. And so I want to connect with them. There are plenty of things we have in common. But I want them to also feel a certain way, like it's a safe space. So great stuff. We're almost out of time here, Andy. But I
Yeah,
would,
let's wrap up on feeling. We have that great Maya Angelou quote, right? People won't remember what
yeah,
you say. People won't remember what you do. People will remember how you made them feel.
right.
And a lot of body language is about how we're going to make the audience feel. You need to remember emotions are contagious. People won't feel things if you don't.
Exactly.
So if you want them to feel passion, if you want them to feel empathy, if you want them to feel inspired, you need to feel those things. And you need to create a space where it's safe for them to feel those things too.
Period. Full stop. I think we should end on that, Andy. It's awesome. I'm not going to say anything else, and it's
All
9
right,
o'clock.
we'll drop the
Have a good
mic on
evening.
that one. We'll call it a day. 2 weeks, we're back, and we're going to be talking about voice, which is a sister to body language. And we'll tell you why in 2 weeks.
Great to see everybody here. Thanks for your comments and your questions and your reactions, and looking forward to seeing everybody back here in 2 weeks' time.